Yeah. So we're just in this old overgrown orchard that had been logged. The adjacent forest had been logged. What'd you say, 13 years ago or so? 13 or 14 years ago?
Yeah, it was 14 years ago. 2006 was when this started.
And the objective was to create some young aspen forest, so they removed a lot of the competing hardwoods that were also in the stand. And the aspen responded really well and had a flush of growth and created a fairly dense aspen stand. And then this spring, that young aspen was mowed down again and is responding pretty well to the treatment already. And there are other species in here. There's black cherries and birches that are also sprouting pretty vigorously, and some have been browsed already. And the old apple orchard remains. It's pretty scraggly, but this is part of that land use history of southern New England. This had been farmed prior to that, and Tom, you were saying that even as late as the 1940s, there was still active crop agriculture.
Yeah, I believe it was the 1942 aerial photographs that we did have. We could see that it was still actively, crops were actively being grown. The last crop that was grown on the slopes behind me was potatoes. They were potato fields. And what had happened is when those fields were abandoned, you had bare mineral soil that was in there, and it created a perfect growing medium for the surrounding aspen to seed and to vegetatively sprout in, which created that dominance of aspen in here, which is reason why when Mass Wildlife acquired the property, why we came back in here to do the forest management, to target, to cut that aspen, to stimulate the regeneration response of that vegetative regeneration response of that aspen, to create that structural habitat for the young forest aspen stand. That we've now just mowed part of.
So we're going to walk around a little bit and just observe and get a sense of this landscape and this first growing season response. And we're looking at, here's a cherry that's already been browsed by deer, so black cherry will be susceptible to browsing. The red maples, ash trees, and the aspen, of course, will all be browsed and respond to that browse with various forms of regrowth. This type of really open area for a couple of years will make good brood habitat for things like ruffed grouse and wild turkeys and other birds that are foraging on insects when their chicks, in the few weeks after their chicks hatch. These open areas that are receiving full or almost full sunlight become amazingly productive insect areas, both for all kinds of flying insects as well as ants that other critters will be able to dig up from the soil.
Yeah, and we can even see here there's some old turkey dusting areas in these sandy patches right here. So yeah, the wild turkeys have already come right into these areas pretty fast. Raspberries
and blackberries are another common species that we're going to find in these open areas in the first couple of years after a harvest operation. And they provide browse, so these blackberry deer have already been browsing on it, and eventually they'll survive. Enough of them will survive and produce fruits for a couple of years as well. So rubus, raspberries and blackberries are really common pioneer species in these open areas right after harvest or right after a natural disturbance. I'm going to shut this off for a second.